Good morning, everyone. So this is our LSAT panel. It's our second in a series of three of our grad school slash associated tests panels. And we have with us today Charmaine and Sasha. And so to introduce you guys, could you briefly introduce your name, the year you graduated, your undergraduate major, where you're currently at, what you're currently doing, and then something interesting about yourself?
All right, I think Charmaine is gesturing for me to go first, so thank you. My name is Sasha. It's great to be here. My name is Sasha. I graduated in 23, so just a semester ago. I majored in political science, minored in history. I'm currently attending Cornell Law in Ithaca. The winters are going to set in soon, so we're turning our heater up to max. But a fun fact about myself. God, I'm not going to lie. I hate this question. I'm named after Alexander the Great. So Sasha is like a Russian nickname for Alexander. So even though I'm not Russian in any way, my parents just liked Alexander, so they named me after him.
Very cool, very cool. Hi, everyone. I'm Charmaine. I graduated in 2021, so it's been a hot minute. I majored in psychology and criminal justice after petitioning both departments multiple times. I am currently in law school at ASU Law, so it's very sunny here and very hot in Phoenix. So unlike Sasha, I will not be turning any heat on. In fact, I've turned into a lizard. I need to sunbathe when it's below 80 degrees out. It's very sad. And something interesting. Let's see. I actually did not drink coffee until 6 months ago. And then I went to Vienna, had coffee that did not taste like sewer water. And suddenly now I have my emotional support latte between my classes. So the reason I'm saying that is because I have one right here. So pleasure to meet all of you.
Nice to meet you guys. And then for our first topic that we really wanted to dive into, we wanted to talk about the LSAT. We've heard it's a really important part of the application, so let's start. And then to begin, can you guys describe the LSAT? Like, I'm planning to apply to med school, so I have no idea what's on the LSAT, what's it about. So could you describe like what section was the hardest for you, what general sections there are, what section took the most time to prepare for, stuff like that?
Sasha should maybe go first because my idea of it is dated. I took it during COVID, so it's probably very different now.
Sure, I can go. And yeah, that is an important thing, is that the LSAT does change very quickly from year to year. So the LSAT is the law school application test. It's the main gatekeeping test that serves as the application test for law school. It doesn't test knowledge, like how much you know the law. It tests more how are you able to absorb new information, how are you able to organize information, how can you make logical conclusions, all of that stuff, more than what is your actual knowledge that you have in your head. It's like famously very hard. There are three like main sections of it. So the first one is the logic games. These will be like I can't even describe them. I have to give an example. So it'll be like there are 5 people sitting around a table. A can't sit next to B. C has to sit next to D. F can't sit next to A if D is next to B. And it's like a bunch of conditions, and you have to answer questions based on those conditions. How many possible combinations can you have where F is sitting in chair 6 or something like that? No. So you have like logic games, which is like the famously tricky one, but it's very easy to get the hang of once you practice. Second one is reading comprehension. I'm pretty sure anyone who, Samuel, you studied for the MCAT, I guess. There's definitely some reading comprehension in there, just passages, answering questions based off of those. And then the third one is logical reasoning. It's very law school specific. I don't think many other admissions tests have it. But it's based on deductions, if-then questions, taking circumstances and applying them to another situation, finding flaws in arguments, all of that. Very basic stuff you need for law school. The hardest one, for me at least, was reading comprehension, which was, it was just hard to get a hang of the timing on it because you're always short on time. So you got to go through the passages quick. You got to like skip words. You got to know how to like speed read, and that takes a lot of practice. But yeah, it's an interesting test to get the hang of. Once you have kind of the hang of it, then you just drill it many times before test day. And when I took it, it was online. I think over COVID they transferred them online, and they haven't transferred them back. So I think they're still online right now. But don't hold me to that because in a few years that might change again. Again, it changes a lot. Also, very important, in 2025, the ABA is making it non-required for law school applications, which means law schools can choose not to have the LSAT as part of their application. So something that was like 50% of your application before might be 0 for some law schools, but other law schools might keep it. So we have no idea. It's a very weirdly changing landscape.
Yeah. So as Sasha mentioned, it does in fact change a lot. And something you'll notice from what he was saying is that unlike maybe the MCAT or the GRE, where it's very broad and like substantive knowledge based, the LSAT tries to test your skills and ability to sort of cope with law school. It's not the direct application, but because there's so much if there's so much logical reasoning, that's a lot of what we do with cases, right? So it's very important that, of course, how you do on the LSAT is not going to be representative of how well you do in law school necessarily, but if you really despise the LSAT and you really, really hate the way it works and you really hate reading and you really hate the trapping you in logical fallacies sort of thing, then I would strongly encourage that you consider whether you want to go to law school, because that is almost the entirety of law school. I definitely agree with Sasha that reading comprehension was the hardest. Frankly, I feel like with reading comprehension, yes, you can build those skills, but frankly, you either have it or you don't. So if you find that you cannot make reading comprehension work, I would strongly recommend working on the other 2 sections, because those are training based. You can learn how to do them. The way I did it was I learned the logic games first, the ones where you have the people in the table or like 6 monkeys in a cage and some of them have bananas and some don't, because that's the most interesting and fun, but it's also the one that is sort of the hardest to wrap your mind around. Everything else is sort of training / repetition based. Even reading comprehension, it's a skill you've had for probably at least 15, 16 years by the time you graduate, right? But with logic games, you should probably learn how to do this early on. It sort of frames your idea of how well the test goes after that.
Yeah, so I guess you guys both kind of touched on this already, but given how I guess the way the LSAT is framed with the 3 sections, and 2 of them, like Charmaine mentioned, being primarily like training based, what did your study schedule look like? So I know Charmaine kind of touched on this already in her answer, but like what section did you spend the most time studying for? Did you use any prep books or did you buy any resources to kind of study off of? How many hours per week did you study? So just a brief like overview of your study strategy.
So I guess I'll start with a sort of what I like to call unhinged clown car study schedule. I did not have a very strict studying schedule. So I started studying about 6 months before the test. I opened Khan Academy and did a free practice test. That is essentially what I did. I did that maybe once or twice a week for 2 hours-ish each time for about 3 months, where I would just sort of go through it. And eventually I exhausted the questions they had. I would see the same questions over and over again, particularly in the reading comprehension sections. So at that point, I knew I had to swap out. So I told Sasha about this too when he was taking the LSAT. There's this one company called 7 Sage, and they have maybe like 40 or 60 full pass tests with all like 3 to 5 sections of the test, and they rank the questions based on difficulty. And what I would do for the remaining 3 months was I would just take an hour maybe every other day, and I would sit down and do practice problems for that 1 hour. And at the end of it, about the remaining 3 weeks before the test, I chose all the most difficult questions on the website, so all of the 5-star difficulties ones, and I would just do entire sections of them. So I would pretend that all 30 questions, say, in one section were the most difficult ones in the past. And that is how I sort of trained that. And I did buy prep books, but I didn't find them particularly useful. I know some people really enjoy being taught how to do it, but frankly, that never worked for me. I sort of had to just brute force it in my own head and sort of figure out a strategy that worked for me, because everyone reaches the logical conclusion in a different manner. So if someone's teaching you how to do it, sometimes it doesn't work very well. So I would recommend Khan Academy, Seven Sage, because Seven Sage also has videos. And I would probably skip over the paper books entirely, unless that is how you learn and you sort of need paper.
I disagree a little bit. So Khan Academy, of course, it's free. It's right there. The questions are there. There's no reason not to use Khan Academy. It also has like a study schedule you can set up, which is just, it like tells you exactly when to do the test. So I started studying, so I had my test in June, between summer of what, junior year and senior year. And so at the start of junior year, I started, like Charmaine, I started by opening Khan Academy. I took a practice test. But then like from there, I only took like another test or practice like once every like 3 or 4 weeks. So it was very on and off until after winter break. And then in spring semester, I really cracked down. And the way I would say it, so February, I like started studying, and then like March to April, I really started studying. And then May and June was like really studying, doing tests like every day. I think I did 2 tests a day on some days, which I don't think you're supposed to do. But yeah. So I was doing a lot of the practice tests. I know that on the LSAT website, like the official website of the guys who administer the test, they have practice tests, and those are super valuable. The thing is, they only have like a few, and then to get the rest, you need to pay, which I ended up doing because there's so many tests, and the past tests are the best way to practice. It's just, there's nothing else that's going to help you other than doing the past tests. So I paid for that. Seven Sage I did use. I ended up kind of like, I don't know, I like got lazy or stopped using it like halfway through, but it definitely helps with setting up those foundational concepts. What else? Oh, paper books. Yeah, I kind of disagree on the paper books. I really like the paper books for the logic games, because for the logic games, there's a very specific way you have to chart them out. Otherwise, you're going to be stuck thinking how many monkeys and how many bananas and which monkey gets which banana. It's very complicated. But if there's a specific way to chart, which I can't like articulate here, but there's a way that everyone charts. And when you do that, every question becomes a breeze. And so it's like mandatory to know that way to chart out the logic games. And I learned that from a textbook. So definitely, and this is good because it shows like there's different ways of studying. So no way of studying is going to fit you perfectly, but definitely anything that helps you get practice tests, anything that helps you learn techniques for the 2 that you can practice that Charmaine said, logic games and logical reasoning. Always take that if you can. And then just anything that's free. It's there, it's free, so you might as well take it. So
I think the essence of what we're both saying, though, is like whatever gets you to study. Because as you can hear from both of us, we did not really start studying until it was actually crunch time. Whatever gets you to actually sit down and do it is what you should do. Like, it doesn't matter where you get it. You can get it off like some sketchy third-party site. It doesn't matter. As long as you practice the skills, and then when you take an official practice test, you score decently, I think that's what matters.
It's really interesting to hear your guys' answers as someone who wants to take the MCAT, because for the MCAT, I think you have to review a lot of content, like all of your previous science courses, you have to go through them, psychology, sociology. But for the LSAT, it sounds like it's a lot of practice questions, so really interesting. And then I think you touched on this a little earlier, Sasha, but we wanted to ask, how significantly do you guys think that the LSAT contributed to the law school admissions process? And did you guys, like, for example, discuss your score during interviews?
Okay, so that's a good question. Massive. It's a massive part of your grade. LSAT and GPA combined, you'll hear different like percentages. Some people like say like those 2 combined are 40%. Some people say those 2 combined are 90%. They're a very big percentage. So LSAT and GPA, if those 2 stats are really good, then you're probably getting into a very good school with a good scholarship and all of that. So those should always be your primary concern. I don't want to foreshadow, because I know we're going to talk about age later. But I do think that the LSAT score and GPA really helped pull up the disadvantage from age that I got. So it's so significant that a really significant disadvantage in another field can be pulled up just by LSAT and GPA. So LSAT. If again, after 2025, if the school, you have to look, you have to see which school are you applying to. Do they require the LSAT, or do they not require it anymore? And after 2025, if they don't, then maybe you can relax a little bit. But I have a feeling that a lot of them are still going to require it, especially the top schools, because it's a very good indicator of how much work and how much performance you're willing to put into applying to law school. So all that to say, definitely put your heart and soul into it. That should be the main thing. over internships, over anything other than GPA. GPA should also be very important, although it might be a little more important than GPA too. But it's definitely it's the top one or two thing.
I definitely agree with that. I feel like my year was a little iffy because we were a COVID year, so admissions was completely off. And also, I think personally, just for me, maybe I just wrote really horrible essays. I don't know, but to my understanding, Sasha and I got the same score, but I believe his GPA was still better than mine because I completely tanked first year, for those who were not aware. But I think that it's also important to make sure you get at least some relevant experience on your resume. So LSAT is incredibly important, but honestly, as long as you're above 168, that should be sufficient. And I know that's basically saying as long as you're in the top 10%, that's sufficient. But that is essentially what I'm saying. As long as you're scoring above 168-ish, that should be sufficient for your purposes if you have additional experience that you can use to write a powerful statement of interest.
Yeah, I'll add that's important because you mentioned interviews and I totally forgot about that. But during interviews, they do not ask about scores. They already have your scores on paper. They already have that in your application. So they're going to be asking about, what have you done? What skills do you have apart from the LSAT? What experiences made you want to do law school? Fun facts. They really like go hard into how are you as a human, and so that's very important to also develop. So yeah, very well said.
Just to kind of transition into like a slightly different topic on the application process. And I know a lot of what we've discussed before with like interviews and what they look for, internships, what to maintain GPA. Charmaine also mentioned crafting like a powerful statement of interest. And we'll touch on that, but I guess we wanted to start off with a very like broad question before going narrow. So in general, what was your mindset when applying to law school? Like, for example, were there specific parts of the application that you prioritized more than other than like the LSAT and GPA, which Sasha already mentioned? But yeah, were there specific parts of the application that you prioritized a little bit more? And looking back, would you have changed anything about the way you went about your application?
Yeah, that's a great question. So as for specific, I mean, my mindset was stress. That's if one word for how I dealt with the application cycle was stress. The good thing is you already have the LSAT and GPA locked down, right? So there's nothing you can do to change those. So now you focus on everything else. I asked a professor I had already taken who had offered, like, if anyone needs help with their personal statements for grad school, reach out to me. So I reached out to him and I said, hey, could you help me with my personal statement and my diversity statement, all those statements. And that was definitely the most arduous process because like a class essay, if it's good enough, they'll give a good grade, but it can always be better, right? And you're always competing against everyone else who's applying. So it can never be good enough. So it was like a constant revision process. I never revise essays. I just write them and then I'm done, but I had to constantly revise it. I had to constantly think about it. I wrote like 3 different personal statements and I ended up submitting a different one to like different colleges. So that was definitely like the toughest part of the application was all of the essays and crafting that and bringing that together. If there was something different, I would have done. I don't know. I don't think my essays were red flags. I think the other thing is if your essays aren't straight up red flag, like they show some like character flaw or they're poorly written, you're going to be fine if you have good stats. But the mitigating factor is age, and I think that probably was what might have dragged down my application. But I wouldn't have done it different because I wanted to go to law school right out of undergrad. So I wouldn't have like waited a year. That's just personal preference. So you're absolutely free to wait a year. I think it might be good to get work experience. I know one of my like mentors in EEP, Brian, is actually doing that right now. But yeah, so if I could change anything like within the application itself, unrelated to the age thing, maybe I would have submitted it sooner. I would have reach out to alums of the law schools you're applying to, especially if they're in EEP. Reach out to the alums, and if they're in EEP, oh my God, right? We love to help out like anyone else who's coming into the school. So if I had someone say, hey, I want to apply to Cornell, oh my God, I'm going to go right to the dean. I'm going to say, you really need to admit this person, right? And I did hear at an admitted students event, the dean, Dean Andy from Georgetown, he was like, he was talking about the alums and he was like, if the alums recommend that someone gets in, more often than not, they'll get in. So it's very, very important that you create connections with the alums. I don't think I did that as much as I could. So that's a big part. That's the unspoken. That's not on the application. That's separate. But you should definitely do that starting in like your third year, maybe.
Yes, so it's been a little while longer for me, and everything Sasha said was golden. He's absolutely correct. It's very important for that. I also did not do a lot of the alumni networking portion. I think, frankly, that might be the scariest part. And unfortunately, yes, it is an unspoken rule that if you don't have alumni references, it's very difficult to get into the T14, which is the top 14 schools, even though they claim they no longer care about rankings, they absolutely do, right? So the T14. If I could change something, I think firstly, I would change who I asked for personal statements. So I'm not sure who Sasha asked to help with his personal statement, but I had my thesis advisor help me with mine. And it's by no means a bad personal statement. And he's very knowledgeable and was very familiar with my strengths and weaknesses. So he knew what to highlight, right? But I think what many will find, especially as they progress through law school, is that law schools have a very particular way of writing that they really, really enjoy. And if you can structure your personal statement in the format that they enjoy seeing legal writing in, and use that sort of logical structure to frame who you are, it almost makes it seem like you're part of the in-group already because you think the way they do. And the thing about legal readers is that we read things and we will almost look for things in the places where they normally are. There's like a specific structure. So if you can find an attorney or an alumni, and I'm happy to be this resource for anyone as well, who is willing to help you restructure your personal statement to maybe match that framework a little bit more, like not straight up copy paste it, but if you're willing to match it a little bit more, I feel like that might be useful. Another thing is I would probably not have applied to so many schools. So I was somewhat selective about what I did, but I still applied to like 10 different schools plus 2 PhD applications for forensic psychology, which is a different spiel. But I ended up breaking down crying at the dining table near Thanksgiving, which is when I submitted my applications. And that is not worth it. You should definitely not be so stressed out by your applications that you're crying. You should pick a manageable amount of schools that you really are interested in and you can write very compelling essays for and only apply to those. And you should be able to finish applying by November. Like that is the timeline. If you apply any later, then you sort of risk your chance of getting A, scholarship money, and B, just an admission spot. So as Sasha says, apply early.
Yeah, I just want to add, in case we forget about this, there's a lot of like small idiosyncrasies. So I urge you guys to, like, if you want to do law school applications, obviously, research the law school application process, because there's like very small, for example, if you submit an application and then they haven't responded for a few months, you're encouraged to send like an update letter if you've gotten a new job or a new opportunity. And that shows you're still interested in school. If you can tie it back to them, like to that school specifically, I'm interested in, I just got a new job in this, and this relates to what you're really good at, which is this in this school. That they'll love that. So that's important. If you get waitlisted, you send a letter of continued interest to share. There's like a bunch of like, you know, idiosyncratic little small things that you should always try and do. So definitely do more research or ask us. I'm more than willing to help. I know Charmaine is more than willing to help. Just ask us and we will tell you everything we know.
You guys really are law students using all those fancy words like idiosyncratic. For our next question, we wanted to For our next question, we wanted to change like time frame a little bit. So you're actually in law school. Did you guys feel prepared when you started? And if so, what experiences like internships, volunteering, classes, major helped the most?
So looking back, I think the most valuable part of law school that gave me an edge in first year, which is the most important year for setting your rank, is actually being able to read. And this sounds very simple. It's like, what do you mean everyone can read? But being part of 2 majors that were very reading heavy and very writing heavy, and being able to at least have a background where I could pull out decent papers in 2 hours out of thin air, meant that I wasn't scared of the fact that I had 30 to 60 pages of reading for each class each week. And I think that's the most important thing to prepare for law school. But honestly, other than that, I don't think it really matters what specific major you're in, as long as it's something that's a heavy workload. And this sounds sort of insane because it's like, why do you want to torture yourself? But I think getting used to being able to sit down and read and do whatever it is that you need to do for your major is just the most important part, because a lot of people struggle with like the work ethic in first year. And as long as you develop that, then it doesn't really matter. Other than that, I really don't think anything can prepare you for law school. The one thing I would say is maybe learning to brief a case. And once again, that is something that any law school alum would be happy to help you with. But learning how to read a case and how to take notes on that case is what will prepare you the most. It doesn't matter what major you're in or what internships you do, because more likely than not, if you're doing an internship as an undergrad, they will just be putting you there, and you will probably be bringing coffee, or you will probably be copying papers, because you are not very useful until basically your second year of law school as a legal intern.
Yeah, a lot of that I totally agree with. So as for the like what helps you get experience, I totally agree. There's nothing specific that's going to get you experience. They're always very big on there's no way to prepare for law school. You just come and you do it. And I think that really is true after doing it for a month. I don't know how much experience I have in it. It's funny because she's saying like briefing and stuff. I'm still working on that. I'm still figuring that stuff out for myself. So, but I do think that, first of all, I do think that there's definitely things you can do in undergrad that'll familiarize yourself with that. So definitely majors that have a lot of reading, very good. Majors that have a lot of writing, very good. You don't actually write that much in 1L. Until the finals, of course, when you'll be writing a lot of essays. But you don't actually write that much like for regular assignments. But still, writing is a good way to put your thoughts on paper, and it's a very important skill to have as a lawyer. That being said, I would also say this is like very highly advertised advice for law school. I'm not sure how true it is, but they do say don't take a harder major if you think it'll screw up your GPA. That's how important GPA is that like if you really think that like adding neuroscience or I don't know some tough major to it is going to tank your GPA, just don't do it. Take an easier GPA. It's better to have, not knocking political science, I'm doing political science. It's better to have political science, with a 4.0 than a really hard major with a few points less, because they just care about their raw number. Although in some cases they'll be like, okay, they're the same number, but this major is harder. So that's the caveat to what Charmaine said. Although it is very true, you should get a major that helps you read and write. There are some things that when you enter law school, they don't teach you they don't teach you some specific terms immediately right off the bat. They don't teach you the structure of the federal court system. They don't teach you a lot of this stuff. But it's something that you can absorb over time, or if you do political science, you'll know, or usually at orientation, they'll familiarize you. So don't come in thinking that you need to have knowledge of the law. You don't need to have knowledge of the law. You do need to have knowledge of how to read, write effectively, how to take notes effectively, and all those things. So I would say that that's the biggest thing to be aware of when you're entering. And yes, again, talk to us. If you're about to enter law school, contact us and we will help you with all the things you need to prepare.
Absolutely. One last thing on that though is for those who are not locked into their career paths already with their current majors, because if you're a third year or a second year listening to this, it might be a little late for you. But I think the most important thing to consider at this point is that, at least for my law school, which is we are #1 in innovation, whatever that means. And I know a lot of different law schools are actually very interested in people with STEM backgrounds. So if I could craft the perfect undergrad career for myself, I would probably still major in psychology and/or criminal justice, but I would tack on a tech minor. So if it's computer science, that might be interesting. If you want to minor in math, if you really enjoy that, I would do that. If you want to do bio or chemistry or anything of that sort, that would probably be beneficial to you. For those of you currently in STEM, I think that's actually super valuable. It almost puts you in a separate admissions line from what I understand from talking with our admissions team and talking with our current incoming classes. Those who had a STEM background seem to have a much easier time overcoming a lower GPA or a lower LSAT, because technology is very important in the law currently. It's a hot topic, and especially if you have some understanding of AI or blockchain or any of that techie stuff, it makes you very valuable for like patent bars and certain practice areas. So if you really want to min-max your way to law school, I would recommend considering something in technology.
Yeah,
How
that's a
about
very
that?
that's a very interesting perspective. Because coming from somebody who has no experience with the law side of things, it's really interesting to hear how like a STEM background can almost be an advantage to you in the admissions process. And I guess we kind of already beat this question a lot already. We touched on this quite a bit, but would you be able to elaborate on like which aspect of your application was the most significant? So I guess we already talked extensively about how the LSAT and GPA make a really huge portion of your application, but what about the other aspects? So for example, your statement of interest, how important do you think that essay was, or your letters of recommendation? So I guess in terms of the other aspects of the application, what was the most significant to you?
You want to go, Charmaine?
I can go if you want me to.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's a little odd for me to answer this question because as I was telling Sasha and the others right before this started, I sort of fell into my application process. Like mine was probably a little odd in the sense that ASU gave me my offer and my full scholarship offer pretty soon. I think it was like in November where I was throwing in all of my other applications. So it was a little different. But I think looking back, the most important thing, your personal statement is probably relatively important, as Sasha's touched on before. It's the one place where you can really distinguish yourself from the rest of the crowd. Like everyone, honestly, more likely than not, you're going to be a political science, history, psychology, English, or some other associated, sociology major. Those are the 5-ish majors that you are likely to fall into. So that's one thing that's the same. You're probably going to have some moot court, debate, mock trial experience or student government experience, and that is going to be the same. So really what you want to do is talk about your background, unique things that you did in your personal statement, and really throw that out there. Don't make a sob story, please don't, but try and incorporate your own background into that. And with letters of recommendation, I think it's more important that you find people who know you well rather than just powerful ones. Like say for some reason you knew the head of your department, but they haven't really worked with you. I honestly, if you had a spare slot, I would ask them to write that letter, but I asked 2 professors and the head of my volunteering organization to write me letters, and they were able to speak to my character, which is important in law school, your character or your reputation, and sort of find people who not only know your work product, but are also able to speak to your personality, because that's really what the law school wants to know. Like, are you someone who's trustworthy? Are you someone who we ultimately want being part of the legal profession?
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned statement of interest or statement of purpose. We don't have that. We have more of a personal statement. We also have diversity statements. So those are more, I think the name of the game is setting yourself apart. And how do your experiences, we know you've done this in this internship. We know you've been in student government. We know you've done this. How has it informed your decision to go to law school? And how will it make you a unique lawyer? How will it make you not a copy-paste person who's also done debate, mock trial, interviewed at the whatever, some city government, done this and this? That was I just went through my own resume. So the way you do that is you say, I have these specific things I took out of these experiences. I didn't just do it to help people or something like that. I did it because I have a specific interest in this specific field of law, but you don't need to say that. You could also say, I have a specific interest in this specific type of internship that I really wanted to focus on. This is what I want to do. They say you don't need to have a purpose when you enter law school, like you don't need to know what you want to do. But I think having a purpose helps on your application, saying, I want to go into patent law. And patent law, by the way, very well helped if you have a STEM major coming in. Or you say, I really want to do government. So I've been doing all these things in policy. Okay, so you've been building up to go into government. So if you have like a clear thread of here's what I've been doing, and it's unique, here's what I want to do, and here's how law school will help me make that gap, bridge that gap. They'll love that. They really like that. Diversity statement, yeah, same thing. Don't make it hardship. Don't. You can make it hardship if it's a hardship that's informed your perspective, makes you unique. Then do it. Don't just do hardship for the sake of hardship. So diversity statement, the same thing. Name of the game is individuality, right? How does your background make you unique? Almost everyone will have something they can talk about on the diversity statement. It's not just, you know, race or gender or like the three big categories. There's also stuff that you can talk about in your experience, you know, hardships or unique, like if you've been to the Olympics or something, that's a diversity statement. We have an Olympian, but we haven't figured out who it is in our class. So those things are big. And then for letters of rec, agreed. You don't want to get like a senator or a judge who doesn't know you very well. That's going to be completely useless. You want to get professors who have worked with you. The thing they look for in letters of rec are they able to do work? Like, will they survive in law school? So if your recommender can say, and they love academic recommendations. If your recommender can say, I was their professor, I know that they can do a lot of work. They can create essays fast. They can read a lot. That's going to be very good. So I had 2 academic and then 1 professional from student government. And that speaks to more your personality. He's really outgoing. He helps people. He blah, 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 right? So that's more of the personal touch. So yeah, it's important you get recommenders who know you, who know your ability to succeed and who are confident in your ability to succeed. And don't just ask them like, hey, can you give me a rec, right? You want to go to them. You want to have a meeting with them. You want to talk about what you want them to emphasize, because you can have all 3 of your recommenders, for example, emphasize different aspects of your application. So one can say he's a hard worker. One can say he's really dedicated to law. One can say he's a good person, right? And that's a much broader spectrum than just they all say the exact same thing. So yeah, name of the game is setting yourself apart. You want the X factor. That's what they call it. The X factor of when they're going through the admission stack, they'll be like, oh, here's the Olympian, right? You want something big like that where they flip through it and they're like, oh, here's the person who there's one clear thing that sets them apart. And if you don't have that, by the way, it's okay. You want to build that in your application on the whole of your application. You don't need that one thing. Oh, he's been to space. You know, you don't need something that massive if you have a small buildup of unique things in your application.
Thank you guys both for your answers. And I think it's really relevant to other application processes as well. Like I know grad school needs letters of recommendation. Medical school needs letters of recommendation. And another thing that I think is relevant to all application processes is the topic that we're all in EEP. So on that note, how did you guys approach that in your essays? Do you think mentioning it was an advantage or disadvantage to your application?
Yeah, that's the question, isn't it? That's always the tough question. I went with, and Charmaine can completely disagree, because I don't think even we know this, even EEPsters who have been admitted, I don't even think we know this. I've talked to like EEPsters at other like old, like way older alumni, and they still don't know. I went with mentioning it, and I went with, so again, I told you, they want you to succeed, right? They want to admit someone they know is going to be able to read well, write well, do well at the hard work. And they automatically have a bias against younger people being able to do that. They say this whatever 17-year-old, 18-year-old is not going to be able to come in here, read 80 pages a day, do 6-hour exams. They just don't think you can. So you need to prove that to them. And you prove that through your recommendation, through your personal statements, through your experience, where you say, I'm doing the exact same things someone as old as me or older would be doing. But a very important way that gets translated is if you mention it, in my opinion. So I mentioned it very specifically, and I said, this isn't a hindrance. This actually helps me because it, first of all, it gives me unique experiences. So it goes back to setting yourself apart. My youth has given me unique experiences. I'll have a unique voice in the classroom, a unique perspective. It's given me a drive to succeed because I'm surrounded by those older than me. It's given me a drive to compete on their level and to raise the bar for myself. And it proves that even at a young age, I can, if I'm on par with people who are 22 when I'm 18, then imagine what I can do when I'm 22. That's like the vibe you want to get, right? So that's what I did. I said it explicitly. I specifically mitigated that it wasn't a disadvantage, that it was an advantage. I don't know if it worked. I have no idea if it worked. So I cannot answer that. But I went with mentioning it. My logic was if I don't mention it, I feel like they're going to find out anyway. I'm pretty sure you have to put your date of birth on applications anyway. And if they find out and you haven't mentioned it, it might be a little weird. So that was just what I went with. But Charmaine might have a different
So I think the thing we need to start by saying is that the few years can make a difference. So Sasha was 18 when he started law school, when he is starting law school, and I was 16. So the very first thing you should realize is that you cannot sign legal documents until you are 18. What you sign is not binding. So that's the first thing you need to consider, right? Because law schools, they very much find your employment, your employability highly, highly important. That is a statistic that matters to the ABA. That's a statistic that matters to rankings. That's a statistic that matters. So if you are unable to get certain internships in law school until you are in your second or third year when you are 18 because you can't sign documents, that will specifically be a concern to them because that will hinder your ability to get employed afterwards. So it's sort of a chain reaction. So if you can't sign legal documents, they're taking a big risk on you. Can you make that back? Can you find employment that is willing to bring you on? And most firms, most government agencies, they are willing to take you on if you are not 18, because how often will you really be signing documents, right? But that's a concern that sometimes people have. Certain HR policies say we are uncomfortable with this. Like for my last summer internship, this past summer, they said you have to be 18 because just the nature of certain clearance issues, like that's what they needed from me. The next thing is, I agree with Sasha, it's probably better to address it. It's something that I guess lawyers call drawing the sting, right? Like if you bring up something on direct examination, then on cross-examination, it sounds less bad. It's sort of like saying, you know, you're pretending your witness doesn't have a criminal history. The very first thing someone on the opposite side, they're going to stand up and say, so tell me about your felony conviction, right? So sorry, lost my voice there, but I definitely address it. I think the way Sasha recommended doing it is a great way of doing it, to sort of say, you know, this is not a hindrance. But I also think it really depends on your law school culture, right? Like, he's at Cornell, I'm at ASU. I'm unfamiliar necessarily with Cornell's culture, but this is where you would talk to alumni and sort of figure out what that law school is like. Because at ASU, one thing about us is that we really do not care about your background. Like we have people who are in their 50s in our law school classes. We have people who are international students and from God knows where, honestly. They have a variety of backgrounds. ASU is very inclusive. Like they really don't care if you don't fit the bill of like the cookie cutter wearing Oxfords and slacks type of person. So this is where you would talk to your alumni, right? Because the thing is, it doesn't matter how powerful your statement is, how much you prove that you are capable of doing the work. The fact of the matter is they might just think that you aren't ready. Especially in like the East Coast schools, they tend to think, oh, you just aren't ready. Like it doesn't matter what you say you are ready for. Like you just, compared to what you could be at 22, you just aren't ready. So sometimes the thing to remember when you do your applications is to not take it personally if you aren't admitted. The sad truth is that we're from Cal State LA. It's not like the highest ranked school out there. So it doesn't matter if your professor says you're very capable of doing work. It's in their mind, it's not the most rigorous school out there. So they're like, oh, whatever, right? We're from Cal State LA and you are just young. That's a fact that cannot be changed. So if the law school doesn't recognize that that's an asset instead of a hindrance, it's not personal. Just there will be a law school for you.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very good point. I know Cornell is different from some of the other Ivies she was talking about. Yeah, a lot of those East Coast Ivy League colleges, they definitely have that kind of, there's an image they have of a lawyer and they want to admit that specifically. Georgetown too, along with Cornell, they're about like breaking the mold a little bit, I think, or that's what they see themselves as. And they want to admit people who they think will break the mold, will be more unique lawyers, can have, you know, unique impacts to the legal field. Think like articles written about them, like, oh, this lawyer is unique in this way, right? And he graduated from Cornell. That's kind of what they want. They want to be able to say, we produce unique lawyers on the national scene. And same as Georgetown. Georgetown has a large student body. They want to admit a diverse field of lawyers. So, and I'm not sure about ASU's culture, but I'm sure it's a very similar kind of thing where they accept a diverse range of people. So, exactly. If you're aiming for a school like these, then you're very well set. Especially if you're aiming for these exact schools, we're going to give you a recommendation. But if you're aiming for a school that's more buttoned down, that's more like Charmaine said, then you might want to think more about that and include that consideration in your application. Maybe take a gap year. Again, I cannot advise on gap years. I just didn't take one, but I know that taking a gap year and like working at a judge's office or at a law firm or something, that could help, because it shows like, oh, I graduated and then I worked, and so I can both work and I graduated young. So you kind of get the best of both worlds. So that might be of help. So definitely keep that in mind. So it's your goals, right? If you want to go to a school that has that kind of culture, then you can apply. If you want to go to a school that really wants you to be the stereotypical kind of version of a lawyer, the same age, the same achievement, which isn't bad. I'm not disparaging that. And if you want to do that, then you should consider that in your application as well. So it's all about the school, and it's all about how much you're willing to do. If you want to go immediately from school into law school, then there might be some applications that you sacrifice. Maybe. Again, we don't know. No EEPster will ever figure this out. This is the conundrum that's been plaguing EEPster since the 70s, apparently.
Yeah, a lot of the advice you gave, I guess it's very general and it can be very applicable to people like me who are applying to grad school and people like Samuel who are applying to med school. And I think it's really interesting. I've never really considered this, but what both Sasha and Charmaine mentioned about like the different culture of the schools, that's something that, at least for me, has never really occurred to me, because all of the schools, they have like a diversity statement page, or like, like the standard like diversity statement. And so I guess it's very difficult to figure out like the individual cultures of the school just by looking at their website. And I guess what both Charmaine and Sasha mentioned was, talking to alumni and talking to people who are like in that environment and or who have been in that environment can be really useful for figuring out the specific culture of the school. And so, yeah, I guess that was just really helpful in general. But I guess we kind of want to zoom in on some specific aspects of the application process. And I guess the first kind of step you have to take when you're applying is determining what schools you want to apply to. And so what schools did you guys apply to? And or I guess if you don't want to give the full list, what criteria did you use to narrow down the schools and to determine the schools that you ultimately want to spend your time and energy into crafting an application for?
So it's been a really long time for me. It makes me sound like a boomer to say that, but it's been a long time. I think, as I said previously, this is an important consideration to consider carefully which schools you want to invest your energy into, right? So back then, the things I was looking for was, I do not want to be locked into a school where I will be unhappy. So I applied to Harvard, Yale, and Stanford just for the sake of applying, just throw it out there. If they take me by chance, amazing. Newsflash, they did not take me. I was not surprised. But for other schools, I knew I don't really enjoy New York. So I specifically did not apply to NYU. That was something I didn't want to do. I was like, I absolutely will never want to be there. If I do, then, well, too bad. I'm not doing that. I applied to schools that had somewhat of a reputation for being able to take you to the DOJ government interest type of stuff, because that is what I wanted to do. But I think if it's almost like an ego thing for me, at that time, I was like sort of just out of it. So I applied to a lot of the T14 just for the sake of saying I applied. So I applied to U Chicago, U Penn, and I think Michigan, perhaps, just for the sake of applying. Would I really, really want to be in those places? No, not necessarily. I got offers back from them, but it was like, you shouldn't do too much based on the rankings. You should really carefully consider what opportunities you can get from that school. And I think something that might sound horrible to say, and that no other law student will probably want to say to you, is that law school is incredibly competitive. It's all about the curve. So the thing I've been telling a lot of people is it might sound weird to say, oh, I'm happy to be at ASU when we are currently ranked 30. For your reference, it was 24 when I was admitted. I don't know what happened, but the US Attorney's Office in Arizona and the US Attorney's Office in Illinois is probably going to be the same type of experience. Like you are doing the same substantive work. Like if you're in the US Attorney's Office in Idaho, then maybe that's not great. But if you're in a US Attorney's Office at a decently large city, it doesn't really matter where you are, right? If you're doing a big firm or a mid-sized firm at any city, it doesn't matter where you're located unless you truly, really want to stay there. So really the thing is, you should be asking yourself, based on the rankings, based on the statistics that are released, and make sure you check the law school website, not just whatever's reported. Can I confidently say that I will be able to not hate myself to try and get into the top 25%? Because honestly, that is the area that matters. That's what gets you postgraduate clerkships in judges' chambers. That's what gets you into larger law jobs. So you should ask yourself, do I think I can beat the other 75% of my class and not hate myself? Can I get sleep? Can I get rest? Can I get by without stress? So if you think that, oh, I really, really want to attend Berkeley, for example, but based on your understanding of yourself and your understanding of their population, if you think you aren't going to be able to handle it, I would honestly not apply too much effort into that one school, because it's not worth it if you hate yourself and you aren't able to compete for certain positions. It doesn't matter what name brand school you go to.
Yeah, so Charmaine gave the perspective of someone who like knows kind of what they wanted to do. I had no idea. I still don't have an idea of what I want to do. So I applied. The T14 is like the measurement in the law school rankings of like the best 14 schools. I don't know why it's T14, don't ask me. But it was T14. So I applied to only the T14. My logic was, and again, I'm not disparaging any others. This was just my logic, and I was kind of stupid back then anyway, or a year ago, was I only wanted to go to T14 because if I didn't get into T14, I was fine with waiting a year, you know? I was like, the only schools that I really want to go to immediately out of school would be a T14. So I only applied to schools that if I got in, I would be happy to go to. Don't apply to fluff schools that like, if you get in, if let's say you get rejected from everything else and get into one, would you be happy going to that one? If you wouldn't, you probably don't need to apply there unless, and this is a whole nother thing, but you apply to two schools at the same rank and then you can negotiate for scholarships. If you're accepted to both, you can play them against each other. You can say school X gave me this much money. Can you beat their offer or else I'll go there instead of you. So that's a reason to apply to a school you never planned to go to, but you can use it for negotiation. So that's a whole other thing. I applied to what, seven or eight schools. It was like about half the T14. I didn't know what I wanted to do, so I just know that if you go to an upper ranked school in the like the first tier of good law schools, then you have a lot more freedom in terms of what you want to do, you know, in deciding. So I knew I wanted to do that. I originally I was debating between Cornell and Georgetown. I really thought I would take Georgetown because I was into government, I was into policy, done all public policy stuff. I really thought Georgetown was the way I was going. The difference, first of all, it cost more to go to Georgetown, a little more, but still more. And the second thing was, I don't know, Cornell felt like it was more of a, again, I was considering my own experiences, which is what Charmaine was talking about. But I was young, right? I wanted to go to a school that was small. Georgetown is the largest class size of any law school. Cornell has like the third or fourth smallest. So I wanted to go somewhere that had a small class size where I could really get to know my classmates, where they wouldn't go to bars and stuff, drinking, because I'm too young for that, which was a good choice, by the way. They're all nerds here, so no one goes to bars. So those were the things I was looking for, right? Georgetown, it's in the heart of DC. Everyone's going to be drinking. Everyone will have their own lives. They'll all be adults, professionals. I won't get to make any connections. Here, you know, they're all trapped in this tiny town, Ithaca. You can't leave. Your family probably isn't here, which means you're probably interacting with the other law school. So it forces you to interact with each other. And that kind of gives more opportunities for me to connect with people who are older than me and who otherwise might not connect with me. So those are the reasons I chose Cornell. I will say for the top percentages thing, as you go higher and higher, it matters less and less. That's not to say Charmaine is wrong, but that is to say, for example, for a federal clerkship, we Cornell places like 1% in federal clerkship, and that's also because everyone who goes here wants to do private law, not clerkships. But like, for example, Yale or Harvard, it's like 30%. So if you want to go, there's like a 1 in 3 chance you get a clerkship. Clerkship is like the most elite law job. But here, this school is all about big law. So 94% of this class went into big law, and big law is, I guess, the second most prestigious law job. It's like the stereotypical law job in suits. You get paid a lot, you have to work a lot, all that. So 94% of our class goes into, and of that 94, a massive percentage, all New York big law. So you won't find a New York big law firm without like half Cornell grads. It's crazy. But so that's something else you might want to consider, is that in Cornell, you would have to like go into a coma not to be able to get a big law job, right? Whereas at Yale, you would have to go into coma not to get a clerkship if you really wanted it, right? So these are the things you would consider. And if you don't know, I would say just kind of veer into picking a school that leaves you with options and a school that you'll be happy at while you attend, which is what Charmaine said, right? So I think those are all both very important factors to consider. And another factor I would say is don't take the rankings too seriously. They have changed. They used to be taken seriously, but then like 3 years ago, they started changing them like crazy, at least in the top 14, I know. They started shifting it a lot. And it started becoming so different that there was no consistency between year to year. So now I think the T14 is still a designation that people use, but I don't really think the placement within the T14 matters. So you wouldn't be like, oh, Michigan went up 2 spots, Duke went down 2 spots, Harvard went down a spot. That doesn't really matter, the spots dropping. It's just the tier. Are you in a tier 1 school? Are you in the top 50 schools? Are you in the next 50 schools? That stuff is really important. So that's all I would consider. Don't be stuck to the rankings too much. And yeah, just go with what you think you'll be happy at, like Charmaine said, both academically and socially. Sorry, we talk a lot. You can tell we're lost.
Well, thank you both for your answers. It's really interesting to hear. Like we've been saying for the past couple of questions, a lot of this is really relevant to other application processes as well. And as you concluded, as both of you mentioned, go where you would be happy. I think that's great advice, and I'll definitely follow it in my application. And then going back to the application process, we wanted to ask, what timeline did you follow? Like, what did you do each month? When did you apply? I think both of you mentioned when you submitted by, but like, what other things did you do during the year?
Yeah. So I'll kind of, this isn't too long a question, so hopefully I can keep it short if I'm capable of doing it. So my timeline was, as I said, LSAT was in June of the summer between 3rd and 4th year. Applications started opening August to September, so that's when I started applying. Worked on essays all throughout that semester. It took a long time because I kind of procrastinated because of the stress. I submitted my favorite applications, like my applications to the favorite schools, before Thanksgiving. Specifically, like the day before Thanksgiving was like Harvard, Stanford, Columbia. And then after Thanksgiving, but before winter break, that's when I submitted the like next wave, the second wave of applications. So that was Cornell and Georgetown was in that group. But I would definitely say try and submit before like December 31st, before the new year, preferably before Thanksgiving. But I think that kind of timeline is also very blurry. So I don't think if you have like a good application, I don't think you're going to be hurt by postponing it a month and making it better rather than submitting a bad application sooner. So it's better to make it better than to submit sooner.
Basically the exact same timeline. I recommend taking it in June because that gives you time to retake the LSAT if you aren't pleased with your score. And that's very important. I submitted everything before Thanksgiving. I was just like, you know what, forget it. I'm throwing this all in. I'm not thinking about it. So yeah, the goal date is probably before Thanksgiving, but as long as you're before New Year's, you're going to be fine.
Yeah, and I know a lot of grad schools, at least, they have a varying timeline. So PhD applications, most of them are due like December 1st. And then masters are really weird. So they're like undergrad applications. So they're like due in like, the latest one for me is Brown, which is due in April. But yeah, I guess this general timeline is very applicable as well. In our GRE panel, / grad school panel last week, Jacob and Natalie basically mentioned the same timeline. So yeah, I guess the fall semester of your senior year is kind of the semester where a lot of application stuff is happening. And so, yeah, I guess kind of zooming into like a specific portion of your application, how did you write like an effective personal statement? Because I know Sasha mentioned that, you know, because of the stress, there was a lot of procrastination that was going on. And I guess writer's block is a big thing that happens as well. And so I guess, how do you get around these difficulties, and how do you also like find your own unique narrative that, as we mentioned before, is really important for setting yourself apart from the rest of the applicants?
I think this one's pretty quick for us since we've already sort of touched on it several times. I think the most important thing is to be able to create one story, like your elevator pitch of who you are. Like, this is my background, which led me to develop an interest in this, which led me to be interested in this career path, which led me to do law school, or something like that. And you should weave that into every single part of your paper. Something I like to do that sort of works for any type of law related writing is like, try and make, they're reading a lot of these, right? Try and put the most important part of each paragraph at the top. You call them topic sentences, thesis sentences, whatever. Your story should be told entirely by the first sentences of each paragraph. If you can tell a coherent narrative with that, you should be fine. The other thing is to really think about who you are as a person. Like, this is the entire law school process. You should think about who you are as a person, where you will be happy, what job you might want, or what you know you don't want, which is more important, which also helps with your school selection. And really think about like, what makes you a valuable human being? What makes you a good human being? And emphasize that in your law school applications. And I think with writer's block, you really just have to sit down and do it. Find a buddy who's also applying to their post-grad schools, sit down, force yourselves to sit on a Zoom call together and just write the thing. It's you just got to do it.
Yeah, before I answer this question, it's so important. This is a very like long question to answer. So, and anything we say here isn't going to encompass the whole thing. Please ask us. We are more than happy. We've already been through the process. Please ask us. I know I keep saying that, but the reason I keep saying that is that if I were in the position of watching this, like a few years ago, I wouldn't contact whoever the alums were, because I'd be too stressed or scared or whatever. Please don't. We're totally like more than happy to help you. It's going to help your application a ton. One of the biggest mistakes I made, again, was not contacting alums. So please reach out to us for help. So that's just a disclaimer. But if you want the Spark Notes version, don't include your resume. Don't just list your resume item by item. Include, again, you want to have that thread tying it through. So for example, one of the brainstorms I was thinking of was educational equity. So I work through educational equity, and that's one of my passions. So I would tie that to everything, right? I'd be like, in ASI, here's a specific example of when I worked for educational equity. Here's when I was working in the city government. Here's an example. When I was working in the governor's office here. So you want to tie that one thread through everything, and that'll let you say your experiences, but not in a way of like, I did this. More like, I did this, and here's how it is important for my journey. Here's how it ties in. Here's how it wasn't just resume stuffing, but here's how it actually helped me evolve as a person. You want to be able to list specific examples, right? That's also how it makes it different from a resume. You don't just say, I increased performance 20%. You say, I met with someone and I saw the light in their eyes, or something like that. It's a very personal moment, right? It's a personal statement. What else? Revise. Write it as fast as you can and then keep revising it. Get someone else to look at it, either us, again, please talk to us, or a professor that you like, or a legal, like someone in the law field, or someone who's been to law school, like Charmaine said, that could really help. So revise, submit it as soon as possible. Don't let procrastination hurt your submission of it. I know it's very stressful. I know it sucks, like having to sit down and actually write it. It's like 1,000 times worse than a normal essay. But you got to do it, and you got to do it as soon as you can. Going back to the application timeline, applications are open till like March, but most of them are rolling admissions. So the sooner you submit, the better your chances are of getting accepted. I know like only Yale isn't rolling admissions of every school that I looked at. So you definitely want to just submit as soon as possible. Yeah, that's basically all the tips, but please talk to us. I would start with like a brainstorm of who am I, and a few ideas, right? So for example, one of mine was, I really want to do educational equity. Another of mine was, I'm forgetting at the moment, but there were like a bunch of like main themes. And then for those main themes, you would say, here are the examples, right? And if you don't have enough examples for one theme, you cut that out, you go to another theme. It's not a problem to write 3 different essays, 3 different personal statements, and switch them up, see which one's best for a particular school, and go to it. You also tailor your personal statements and diversity statements to the school. If a school really prides themselves on multidisciplinary learning, like we combine law with technology, law with business, law with health, then you want to bring that up. Maybe you have personal experiences that cater to that, you want to bring that up. If they are really big into professionalism, you want to tailor that. If they're really big into this, and that, you want to tailor it. So be aware of who you're writing for, be aware of what you're putting in it, try and tie it together. Don't include your resume, and talk to us. Those are my biggest tips.
Yes, quick tag onto that. Absolutely, please talk to us. I've been told for some reason that some people find me scary. I don't know why they find me scary. I hope I'm not scary. I'm always happy to help you brainstorm your thread if you want. Like, it's sometimes hard to view your own experiences in a cohesive light, or maybe you feel like you're bragging. So like, brag to us and we will help you come up with something. And Sasha is like one of the kindest people I've ever met. So like, please go talk to him. He's very sweet.
Charmaine is awesome. Yeah, please, both of us. We're more than happy to help. Yeah.
Thank you guys both for that offer. Really generous of you, really generous of your time. And I don't know if you guys are okay with it. Maybe Dante or someone else could put your availability on the, not availability, like contact info on the Discord server.
I mean, you're both still in the Discord. Does that work for you too? Yeah.
Yeah,
those are your emails if you wanted.
That works for me. Whatever
Yeah,
contact method you happen to have for me is what I will respond to.
All right, cool.
Thanks, Dante. And thank you guys both again for that offer. Really generous. And I'm sure a lot of people will appreciate it. And then I think you touched on it a little bit in your answers, Sasha, more like as something not to do. But on the topic of a resume, how do you like perfect it? How do you perfect your resume? How do you perfect your CV? How do you tailor it?
This is a very good, like, broad general thing that will apply to every application, I think. Law school resumes are not special. The only thing I would say is don't add your LSAT on it. I think that was just a tip I got. You don't need to add your LSAT. It's already going to be in your application. But other than that, it's the normal things, right? When you say what you did, you want to give specific, not examples. You want to give like numbers, right? So increased productivity 40%, increased court filings 50%, heard 30% more feedback from students, something like that, right? Percentages, numbers, to show that you were actually very good at your job, to show that you increased something at your job. Keep it short and sweet, keep it 1 page. If they allow you to do a 2-pager, you can do a 2-pager, but I mean, we're all pretty young. I don't think we'll have a 2-pager. Don't include like frivolous things. I know a weird thing some people sometimes add is frat houses. You can add that. Well, obviously none of us are in a frat house, but that's just an example. But you can add that if maybe you think there's a social experience you got out of it that you could talk about in an interview, but otherwise don't add that. Something else, fun things. You can add fun things. So like sometimes people will add fun facts. Like, I don't know, some very bizarre fun fact I saw was like, can eat 100 hot dogs in a minute or something like that. And you add that on your resume. It's very funny. And then the interviewer will ask you about that. And it shows that you're a real person, right? You're not just a machine with good stats. And that's something that might help out too. So fun facts are fine. Keeping it short and sweet. You want to have numbers. And that's the place where you can brag. You brag. You say, I did fantastic at this. I was the best person who ever took this job. I was loved by my boss. I took this and this job. I got promoted. That's where you brag to your heart's content, right? And you don't have to do a story. It's more mechanical. It's more all of that. So if you're stressed out by personal statement, it might actually help to just focus on your resume first and then go to your personal statement, because that one's more rigid. It's just listing accomplishments. So.
Absolutely agree with all of that. Make sure you include the fun things. So the structure of my current resume. Well, firstly, I know Harvard and maybe some other schools actually have resume templates on their websites. So if you pull that up, if you use a resume that they give their law students to apply to law jobs, right? If you use that, then that almost sort of is like you are already a law student. So whatever you use, make sure it's clean, make sure that you don't have random colors, make sure you don't have your photo, make sure you put in your relevant education, don't put your high school experience. If you have any, that's not useful. Talk about any sort of experience you might have. And what I have at the very bottom is like 2 lines of skills and interests. So I have the foreign languages I speak, and then I also have all my hobbies. So I've been asked about competitive figure skating so many times in a variety of interviews. So put that in there. That's very important. And if you want help, once again, reach out. But the general structure for what we like to do is your name in the header, the other information in your header, and then you have your education, your GPA included in that, your experience, and then I guess the fun facts section. And it should all be in one page. If it's more than one page, you're doing it wrong. You do not need more than one at this point.
If you need help, by the way, fitting into one page, I write so much, so my things always go over one page. So I've become an expert at like cramming the resume into one page. So ask me, I have like a ton of tips. Like you can use a vertical bar to separate things instead of doing a new line. There's like a vertical bar that you have on your keyboard that you can just type and separate your name from stuff like that. So yeah, ask me if you want resume space saving hacks.
Yeah, I guess that's again very broadly useful, since like a resume, like you guys mentioned, it's not as different for applying to law school as it is for applying to other like higher education professional schools. I guess we already touched on this a bit, but to kind of get it into like a cohesive frame, who did you ask for letters of recommendations from, and why did you ask them? Like, what specific skills did you ask them to touch on in their letters, and how, I guess, like, did you provide them with any materials? So I know some people have, they like to provide some of the statements that they write, and they kind of ask their letter writers to look over them and to ask them to kind of form their letters into something that would kind of be a cohesive supplement to that narrative that they're trying to spin. But yeah, I guess just any general letters of rec advice.
Just like Sasha mentioned earlier, I had 2 academic, 1 professional. The thing I've been taught to ask is, do you think you can write me a strong letter of recommendation? Because sometimes professors will say they can write you something, but the thing is, sometimes they really don't know you all that well, or maybe they don't want to write you a letter. And you can generally gauge that if you just directly ask them, like, will you be willing to write me a strong letter of recommendation? Things that people have asked me for, personal statement plus your resume, just sort of they can see what you're writing and they can sort of corroborate that. As Sasha mentioned previously, find someone who can say that you work hard, that you never complain, that you are willing to be awake at 10 p.m. to respond to their silly lab requests. That's my PI. He emailed me, please give me back whatever as soon as possible at 8:30 p.m. I gave it back to him at 10 p.m. He's like, oh, I meant on Friday. I was like, what are you talking about? That's not as soon as possible. But find someone who's willing to write that stuff for you. Yeah.
Yeah, rec letters are another very big, like, scary thing. I know it can sound very scary asking your professor for something, from them. Just think about it like this. If someone asked you for advice, it's something you were good at, would you feel like offended, or would you feel like burdened? You wouldn't, right? You'd be like, okay, they're asking me for advice, I'll give it. That's the same way professors feel. They're like, okay, the student is asking me for something, I'm happy to give it if they're a good student, so don't feel nervous about asking. The way I asked was very similar. I would say, I need a letter of rec for my application. Specifically, I need a letter of rec that can speak to my ability to be a good writer, to be this and this. This school particularly requires a very strong the phrase I used was, this application process is very competitive and I need a very strong letter of rec. Would you be willing to provide it? So you need to heavily imply this needs to be like a solid gold letter of rec. And if it's not, no worries, just don't give it to me, right? I'd rather have you say no than give me a bad one. Something else, you can slip it into conversation if it's a professor you have. So I was like talking to my professor. I was like, I'm actually applying to law schools right now. I'd like to get your advice. And he was like, I can't give you advice because I applied to like history. I went to Berkeley, as a history master's student, but I can give you a letter of rec for law. And so I was like, I would love that. So stuff like that. Or I know some professors well enough that I just asked. I've asked McLennan, Professor McLennan, who a lot of full students have. I've asked him for letters of rec so many times. It was just a run of the mill thing. But do not ask them and then let them go by themselves. You need to meet with them. You need to send them things. You need to tailor it. Okay. You need to have them say what you want, basically. So you go to them and you say, hey, for your letter of rec, I was really thinking if we could focus on, my ability to succeed in the classroom. And you can even say example sentences. You can be like, for example, Sasha is able to handle really big workloads. He's able to read very fast. He's able to handle the stresses and rigors of the classroom just as well as or better than any other student in the class, something like that, you know? And that's, by the way, that's also where I fit in the age thing. I would talk to my professors and I would be like, specifically, can you not mention the age, but can you say things that imply that even though I'm younger, I'm still just as good as someone my age? So like things like he handles coursework just as well as anyone else, something like that, where it heavily implies he's younger, but he's just as good, you know? So you need to talk to them to get that stuff out of them. With my professional rec letter, that was Dina at ASI, I asked specifically, I suggested some examples to her. Of like, hey, could you talk about the time I organized this event? Or hey, can you talk about the time I met with this person? And get those specific examples. Rec letters need to have specific examples. So make sure you tell your recommender, hey, can you include some specific examples in this rec letter? So again, do not be afraid to steer it. They are not going to be offended if you ask. This is your future, right? They do not care. If someone came up to me and was like, hey, can you give me advice? And I gave them advice, but they were like, no, I mean for something else. I'd be like, okay, I'm not going to be offended, right, that they ask for something else. So if you ask for a rec letter and they want to go in one direction, feel free to correct them because it's your future. It's not theirs. So, and don't feel nervous about it. They did it right when they were applying to colleges, so they know. And they give out these rec letters like candy to every student who asks. So they don't care. They're not offended by it. You shouldn't feel stressed by it. And if you need help on how to ask for a rec letter, ask me, ask Charmaine, talk to alums who know. And also, actually, you can get a rec letter from alums. If you apply to Cornell, for example, I get a rec letter from me. I can make a rec letter for you. If you apply to ASU, get a rec letter from Charmaine, you know? And that can be very good. A rec letter from an alum of the specific college you're applying to is solid gold. So again, don't feel afraid is the main thing. Don't be afraid to ask for what you need on that rec letter.
Really helpful, really general advice once again, and I'll definitely use some of the words that you guys mentioned, like very strong letter of recommendation in my own applications. And then to cap this section about the law school admissions process off, we wanted to ask, do you have any general tips for applying to law school? Or do you have one specific tip that you think everyone should follow?
If I may, Sherman. Thanks. I think something I really hate about the law school app is that it's gate kept. It's made to sound really hard, just like law school. It's made to sound really hard, really rigorous, really difficult. You shouldn't do it. You know, all this stuff. It's not as hard as it's tough. You know, it requires willpower. It requires aptitude. It requires all of these things, but it's not impossible. It's not beyond any of your abilities. Every EEPster I've met has more than enough ability to do what's required to apply to law school. So please don't feel intimidated by all the bullshit on Reddit or any of these forums where it says this is impossible. If you're not 100% committed to a lawyer, don't go to law school. It's fine. I swear to God, they said like the first year was so hard, and it's been really chill. I mean, a lot of reading, right? A lot of work, but it's chill. It's what I like to do. I'm happy here. All of that stuff. So don't feel intimidated. Don't feel like everyone else is saying it's scary, so it will be scary. Don't procrastinate. I know the stress is really bad. I know it's way easier to put it off and watch some YouTube than to do it, but you gotta do it as soon as you can. You can definitely grind it out over like fall break or Thanksgiving break. That's a great time to just work on it. Do it in bursts so that if you're stressed by writing a lot, maybe just write a paragraph that day or a sentence that day and then move on. So those are my tips. And if you're seriously considering gap year, I highly advise talking to some of the people who have done gap years. Ryan Yu again, who is really like my guy who helped me with law school and all that. He's taking gap year. So like there's so many ways to get to law school. Don't feel bad if maybe you apply and you get into no schools the first time you apply. Who cares? You just apply the second time. You'll get into, you know, so there's no one way to get into law school. There's no one strategy to get into law school. You do what you feel best works for you. And ultimately don't feel so stressed about it that you think that you just drop it and stop doing it. And again, if you need any help, encouragement, advice, referrals to other people, us, we're more than happy to help because we've been exactly where you are, and we know how the road is.
Absolutely agree with that. Another person you can ask for gap year experience is John Lillis. He's been part of previous panels. He is currently going to UCLA Law as a first year. He took a gap year as well. Ask for help, but I think the most important thing is as Sasha said, don't let it freak you out, but also remember, if you are hating everything about law school, the more you learn about it, the more you hate it, maybe think about, do I still want to do this? If every time you have to click onto a law school's webpage and you feel like it's the most pretentious group of people, maybe don't do law school. And the other thing is, remember to take care of yourself during the admission cycle. It's super stressful. Don't make it like your life's biggest decision, right? It is a pretty big decision, but if you don't end up going to law school or if you don't end up getting into your dream school, it's not the end of the world. Like, I'm a firm believer in, firstly, whatever needs to happen will happen. There is a reason that things happen. And maybe either this school just wasn't right for you, or maybe you'll be happier elsewhere. Like, you need to sort of make sure you're in the correct mindset. Otherwise, it becomes very difficult. The other thing is, remember that you can do whatever you want. You can do everything correctly, but if you are dead, you cannot go to law school. If you are dead and you are dying mentally or physically, you cannot go to law school. Like, it doesn't matter how stellar your application is. So find a cheerleader, find a support group, and try to take care of yourself.
Again, like we've been saying throughout this panel, it's very good advice. And just in general as well. I think Samuel and I are both applying this this season, and or no, okay. Well, a lot of people in my year are apparently taking 5 years then. Well, I'm applying this season, and it's very overwhelming with all of the things that you need to do, but it's very, I think, important as well to kind of just take a step back, like Charmaine said, and just realize that like this isn't as stressful or as big as it needs to be, and just take it as something that is almost fun. I know a couple people have described, I think in the past, that the graduate school admissions process should be kind of almost a fun one. Jacob in the last panel said that the interviews where they basically just fly you out to another state, fly you out to school, and you just kind of socialize with the people there. Yeah, it's a very fun process. And I guess in general, that's very good advice. Yeah, and I guess moving into a little bit more of like the actual law school experience, since you both are law students, and we've seen that by how extensively you talk about things which we appreciate in our panel. How do you feel that like going to law school as an EEPster is different from like a normal law school experience? I think we touched on this extensively in some of our past answers, but the admissions committee might sometimes view younger people as not being as prepared for law school, which obviously isn't the case in both of your situations. But yeah, in general, how do you feel that like people have reacted when you tell them about your age, or if that's ever something that comes up? So just in general, like how do you feel that going to law school is different as an EEPster?
So 2.5 years later, how is law school different? I feel like you will be irrevocably changed once you go to law school. Your mind just does not function the same way ever again. And we'll probably touch on this a little bit, but I think the thing that's a little different for me is that I intentionally didn't tell people my age when I first started law school. In EEP, everyone knows who you are. Some of us look very young. Some of us, like my dear friend Kyle Tang, used to have rolling backpacks. Like, it's very obvious who the EEPsters are, right? So in law school, I wanted people to know me for me, as Charmaine, the law student, or Charmaine, the girl who's always willing to help with notes, as whoever I wanted to be, instead of Charmaine, the 16-year-old. Because I feel like once you're classmates in a competitive environment, once you're classmates, certain people, when they figure out how old you are, it's much harder for them to see you as a human being. They sort of see you as like an animatronic, it's not great. So for me, it wasn't very different until about November, where ASU released an interview and a video statement about me, and then everyone knew my age. After that, so for a week, I had people coming up to me asking me if I was the 16-year-old. That was a little different. But other than that, I really don't think it's that different from attending law school as a law student. Certain people don't drink here, so it wasn't odd that I didn't want to drink. I go to the same classes, I say the same things, I do the same things. It's all the same, really. And I think if you are able to find friends who appreciate you for who you are, you will find that you are treated in a very kind way, as you should be. I don't think that it's necessarily harder as a younger student. I think the only thing is to try and get to know people without bringing up your age. Your age should not be your defining factor. It's firstly obnoxious to other people because, like, why are you bringing up the fact that you are 18 or 16 or 17 when we're having a random conversation about our college majors, right? But it just puts an unnecessary label on you. But your law school experience should be the exact same as everyone else's.
Yeah, I actually had a bit of a different experience, or maybe it'll change because again, I'm not that far into law school, but I do feel, first of all, I don't reveal the age, but it has been going around because if I'm directly asked, I have a policy. I don't want to like straight up lie because then if it comes up later, I'll have to explain why I lie. So it's a whole thing. So I just, if they ask, I tell. And so we were in like a small group of friends, and someone was like, well, "What's everyone's age?" And then I had to say, and then it's been going around a little bit. So like half the law school knows by now. But I don't know, maybe Cornell isn't as competitive, or maybe it'll get competitive later. But I don't think the age thing is really hurting me socially either. I think everyone definitely sees me as like on par as just a law student, as a normal, thing. It gets brought up every so often when they're going to drinking and they're like, we'll see you after, or like there's like a joint bar restaurant here. There's like three bars here. It's a very small town. But there's like this joint bar restaurant here, and they'll be like, we'll go into the restaurant side and we'll sit in the restaurant side so that you're not like excluded. And I'm like, thanks guys. So there's like sometimes they'll be nice and they'll make exceptions. I haven't had anyone treat me badly or because of my age. I know that can be a thing where people are like condescending because of your age, and that's why I think a good idea is to try not to tell them your age until you've interacted with them as a human. So then they think of you already as a law student on par. Then they know you're younger and they're like, wow, you acted just like us. You're just as mature. You're just doing the same things, and that'll really help. Instead of if you come up swinging with I'm 18, then they'll be like, oh, he's the baby of the group. Oh, he's young, But if you've already established I'm a law student, I can hit just as hard as you guys academically. I can hit just as hard as you guys socially. Then if it comes up, then they're like, wow, you're mature for your age, or stuff like that, which is definitely better than condescending remarks. So that's one thing. Academically, not even a factor. I mean, there was like a month, I don't think very far ahead, but there was like a month before law school where I was like, oh shit, I'm like going into this, at 18. I don't know if like, what if the first day of reading comes out and I just can't understand a word and I completely like die right there. And that was a stress I had, but it's not hard at all. Or harder than it would be. It's not harder. It is tough, but it's not harder than it would be. It's fun. I'm really enjoying the classes. I love every single class I go to. I really love the readings. There are a lot of readings, but I really love them. And I love taking notes on them. I love talking with my friends about the law. So academically, it's not going to be an issue. If you got into the law school, that's the whole point of the application process, right? They only accept people who are going to do good. So if you got in, don't doubt yourself that you're not going to be good once you're in it. You're going to do fine. Socially, like I mentioned, it might, be a thing. It might be brought up a little bit, but I don't think it'll be, at least in Cornell. Again, I can't speak to others, maybe more competitive environments, but in Cornell, at least it's a supportive community. It's not brought up that much. It's just, oh, wow, that's crazy. And then, the conversation just keeps going. I'm kind of jealous that you got an interview. I kind of want an interview. But yeah, so it's just a normal thing. I remember we also have like really old, like 51 is our oldest. We have old applicants and I'm the youngest. So it's definitely not out of place for, again, Cornell, it picks people who are unique, right? They want to break the mold of lawyers. So it's par for the course. So I don't think you're going to have a social problem. It's just like your undergrad classes, at least my undergrad class. It was fine, right? I was just another undergrad. I don't think it was ever a big thing. I was definitely on par with all the Cal State LA, like students and the material. It was all fine. It'll be the same in law school. It doesn't really change. Maybe they'll get a little older. The age gap might increase, but you're talking about the same subjects. You're having the same social life. It's all the same. You're just younger. So definitely don't volunteer. please don't be the annoying kid who brings up that they're young, in conversation. There's a whole program that Cornell has where it accepts kids like 1 year younger, and it's a whole thing. Don't bring up that you're younger, please don't. I don't know. All right, that's all I have to say.
I feel the need to defend the ASU class. From what I said, I swear we aren't like scary people. Like no, not everyone's super competitive. I've heard that from other schools, like the Ivy League schools. They tend to be a little more cutthroat. What I meant by that is that there was one current second year, who ran for student bar association on the fact that she was the youngest law student. Now I think the entire class hates her or is severely unfriendly sometimes due to things she says. So don't volunteer, but also remember that like what I meant is that you sometimes might have it called out. So sometimes before I turned 18, whenever the professor would say, it's okay, we're all adults here, my friends who were sitting next to me would turn to me and be like, well, we aren't all adults here. So you might get teased a little bit, but if you find friends who really enjoy you, they'll do what Sasha's friends are doing, what my friends are doing. They'll pick places that you can join them in, and they won't purposely pick bars just to exclude you. I think you'll be fine. Like, don't stress too much. No one really cares that you're younger than everyone else.
Well, thank you guys both for your answers. And it's definitely something that is just unavoidable, as we're all under 18. That's what makes us EEPsters. So thank you guys for explaining like how you guys cope with it. And then on a similar topic, we wanted to ask, can you describe a typical week in the life of a law school student? Like, how is it different from undergrad? And what do you like most? What do you like least?
Well, I'm the expert because I've had 4 of them. But a typical week in the life of a law student. Yeah, so a lot more classes than undergrad. I know senior year, right? There's senioritis, so your classes, you're taking like 2 classes a week. It's totally chill. You're mostly hanging with your friends. Law school goes right back to the high school schedule, of classes every day, even Fridays. I hate classes so much. 8:45 classes, which I weaned myself off of by like 2nd semester in Cal State LA. But now I'm back at 8:45 classes. So it's a tough schedule. But it's still, by the way, it's still much less than high school classes. I think classes always end before lunch or like 1 class after lunch. So it's still a very, very loosey-goosey like schedule of classes compared to high school. I don't know how we did that many classes in high school. But so the typical series of classes, at least for 1L, it's always standardized. So first semester, it's always torts, which is personal injury, contracts, which is contracts, con law, constitutional law, what's the other one? Civil procedure, which is like how you file a lawsuit, and then legal writing or lawyering, like how to be a lawyer. So it's more of the technical class of how to make arguments, how to argue, how to write like a lawyer, all that stuff. So typically what you'll do is you'll go to class. The class will explain the readings, so you have to read beforehand. It'll be typically 40 to 80 pages a day. It sounds tough. It's not that tough. It really isn't, because you're not supposed to be like reading every single word. You skim, you get the broad strokes, you take notes. It doesn't take like an insane amount of time. Although it is more than undergrad. It is more than undergrad by a significant amount. So you do the reading beforehand. In class, it clarifies the reading. It talks about the reading. The professor will basically say what's important from the reading, what you should have taken away. After class, you eat lunch, you hang out with your friends. Usually there'll be, I guess a lot of schools do bar crawls. I heard this was a very popular thing. Like I went to a Duke panel and they all went to bar crawls. We don't do that here. We walk in the botanical gardens or we go to the store. I'm telling you, nerds, complete nerds. But it'll be like fun activities, social activities that we'll do. You'll hang out with your friends, you'll get food, a lot of club meetings, a lot of free food. Always take the free food if you can. I've eaten so many free pizzas. I'm like 50% pizza at this point. And then it's back to reading for the next day. Your hobbies, though, I will say, they say your hobbies get erased. Your hobbies shouldn't get erased. If you play video games, play video games. Every Friday, I make a point to like walk around campus and go to a new place. So we have like lakes on campus. I go to the lakes, or I'll walk around campus, look at the new buildings or the old, so many buildings, any of the buildings. So you just do things that get you out of the house, that keep you from getting depressed because you're just locked in a room reading all day. Definitely don't be doing that. People who say that are just trying to scare you. It's not reading 24/7. It shouldn't be your personality. Your personality shouldn't be, look at the last reading I did. It should be separate of that. You should be talking to your undergrad friends. Please talk to your undergrad friends. Don't like stop talking to them, all that stuff. So yeah, it's not hell yet, but I know once it gets to finals, it's definitely much tougher. There's a lot of like outlining of the notes. There's a lot of studying just 24/7. But I mean, the very common thing they say at Cornell is if you say you spent like 8 hours straight studying in the library, you're doing it wrong. That's the common thing they say. So you shouldn't be doing that. You shouldn't be bragging that you're doing that. You should be working hard, having a social life, having your hobbies, and then going to class. That's the main thing. And doing clubs. Although you don't do too many clubs in the first year.
I'm so jealous of what Sasha's saying. It sounds so great to be able to walk around botanical gardens. What we have here is desert. We have desert. So great. Can't even find a good boba spot. So law school schedules change for us. For us, we didn't take con law first semester. We only had 4 classes, and then we took other things second semester. So first year is pretty standardized, as he said. It will be a different rotation of classes, but it's all those classes he mentioned, plus property, criminal law, and a second writing class. So it's just like that. A week for the past 2 years for me has sort of looked like classes during the week. Yes, you unfortunately have long classes. I used to think 50-minute classes were long. Now they're 2 hours long, and I sit there and I'm like, oh my God. Please do read before class. It's very important. We have things called cold calls where the professor will randomly pick a name from a list and say, Sasha, please tell us about the Fergalamid case. And you will be completely unaware, and you will have to sit up straight and announce the facts to your entire class. And that can be scary if you are unprepared. So be prepared. In second year, I worked both semesters. So during the week, I would clear out days so I could go to my internship and do that. And I was there for maybe 4 hours a day, 2 to 3 times a week. And then on the weekends, I do my readings. Sometimes I go out with friends. I went to Costco yesterday with one of my friends. We had a great time. It was the best thing ever. On the weekends, I do readings from massive books like this. I highlight, I brief them, I type up notes, write notes, and then, yeah, that's it. Hey, there we go. Yeah. Yeah. So it's pretty chill. As Sasha says, if you're spending your entire life doing readings, you are absolutely doing it wrong. Please make sure to get enough sleep. I'm a little bit of a hypocrite because I only got 7 hours last night, but not because I was working, but because I was talking to a friend. You should be able to get 8 hours of sleep a day. Make sure you don't skip meals. Yes, go to free law school food events. You will find them during lunch hour. For us, it's always like Jimmy John's sandwiches, always sandwiches. So yeah, make sure you have fun. I think that's the thing.
Yeah, for us it's Panera. But yeah, it's exactly what she said. It's all about balancing the work and life, and not letting the work take over too much of your life. So maybe have a rule like Sunday. I'm never going to work on Sunday. I'm always going to watch TV or go outside. And that'll prevent law school from taking over your entire life or depressing you or something like that.
Yeah, I think it's largely the same for undergrad as well. It's like not letting all of the like academics or all of like the research or all of the internships take over your life, but like joining clubs. And I guess one thing that I'm hearing is that same theme kind of carries over into law school, even though I guess in general the academics are a little bit more rigorous, but that same like work-life balance should still be maintained. And obviously like being a healthy human, getting sleep, eating. But yeah, for our last question is a little bit more specific, but I guess we also kind of heard some of like themes of this answer. But what do you guys plan to specialize in, and how do you decide? And I know with Sasha, you said you weren't entirely sure, but I guess after a solid month of being in law school, do you have kind of an idea of what you want to specialize in?
Charmaine, you want to go first on this one? I think I took the last one first.
Sure, that works for me. It's hard to really lock down what you want to specialize in, right? Because unlike med school, you don't really have to pick a specialty ever. You can, like, I know people who are 30 years into their law practice and that they suddenly decide they want to switch practice fields. Like, you don't have to pick. But if I had to pick something I was really interested in, I'm really interested in federal prosecution, specifically national security prosecution. I think that's really interesting. I find like the terrorism stuff, the cybercrime stuff, I find all of that really, really interesting. So that's what I'm hoping to go into. I've developed an interest in like policy law enforcement work. So specifically Fourth Amendment protections against like law enforcement use of technology. So things like facial recognition technology or the use of data brokers and stuff like that. So sort of the sketchy middle ground between criminal law and many other things is what I'm interested in. How did I decide? It's sort of made sense for me, right? For a person who started majoring in psychology and criminal justice because her mom and she and her mom would sit and watch Criminal Minds for hours on end. Like, makes sense that you would go into criminal law, right? But really what solidified it for me was interning at the U.S. Attorney's Office, which is the federal prosecutorial agency in each state. I found it really, really interesting. I really liked it. So that's sort of what solidified it for me. And do not worry if you really are not clear what you want to do. Most people really aren't. The one thing you need to know is, do I like standing up and talking? Or do I not? That's basically the only thing you need to know. And then you can guide your broad strokes idea of what you want to do after that. Like, other than that, if you're like, I must practice specifically in this one contracting area, you're going to be a little disappointed because either you're going to show up and it's not going to be what you thought it was, or you're going to find out that it's really hard to break into that field or something because it's so niche. Keep your mind open, I think, is the thing.
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah, I still have no idea. I mean, I was bouncing from JAG, which is like the Army, Navy, Air Force lawyers, the lawyers who work for them, bouncing from that to like clerkships, which is working for a judge, to big law, to government. I originally entered law school because of government. I like government. I want to go into policy and government long term. But short term, I have no idea how I'm going to get there. So I was looking at criminal. I was looking at like litigation. So litigation is when you're in the courtroom practicing. It's what Charmaine said, do you like to like stand up and talk? That's litigation. Or do you like transactional, which is you're in the back rooms creating the agreements, right? And you don't actually have to practice in the courtroom. So I have no clue whatsoever. And I assume I'm going to develop it more over time. I feel like here the standard is, if you don't know what you want to do, go into big law, because big law does everything. They do everything from tax to litigation to IP, intellectual property, to transactional, to international arbitration, everything, right? So you can go in and then you can figure out what you want from there. So that, like, for now, the default plan, if I can't say anything else, is I guess big law. But I'm also interested in just about everything. So yeah, I guess it'll take some time for me to hone what I want, but it's a learning experience, and it's fun to. I mean, we were talking about like dealing with stress for applications. If you're ever stressed about like dealing with the applications, just go to the website for the law school and see how many programs they have. International programs. They'll have clinics where they free people who are on death row. They'll have clinics where they litigate First Amendment rights. They'll have groups that litigate from the Supreme Court. They'll have local government externships. They'll have externships at the United Nations. They'll have all of these things. And there are so many amazing opportunities in law school. So if you're ever stressed about the law school application process, just go and look at the websites and say, that's what I'm applying to. And that's what I'm going to be able to do. And it's truly amazing, the range of things you have. International programs. There's like so many French people at this school. There's so many international exchange programs that we send our students to their schools. They come to our schools. So there's such a broad range, and definitely take advantage of that. Do everything you can. Go to every club you can, especially in first semester. It doesn't matter if you're not into IP. If they give you free pizza, go to the IP law meeting, take the pizza and learn about IP law. And if you don't like it, no harm, no foul. So yeah.
Definitely explore your options. One of the reasons why I picked ASU was because we have a DC program, so I could get to DC. That's what I'm doing next semester. We also have a Milan exchange program where we also do the same thing with the French students at Sasha's school. So definitely just explore. And I guess the transactional litigation thing, the joke is like, do you want to create the problems or do you want to solve the problems created by the transactional people? It's very false. Transactional people are great, but yeah, that's basically all you got to know. Everything else, just go with the flow.
And then on the same topic of experiences, we have a question from an audience member, which is, what clubs are there in law school?
Yeah, so the clubs, here's the importance. So I had a mentor. I still have a mentor. First semester, they like a bunch of different clubs will assign mentors. And so we asked our mentor, you know, how important are clubs? Should we join clubs? His answer was, eh. So that's how important they are in law school. So definitely don't, they're not resume padding. They're barely resume padding. If they see a bunch of clubs on your resume, they honestly don't care. No legal employer cares. That being said, they're very useful ways to learn more. So it's not resume padding, but if you genuinely want to learn more, if you genuinely want free food, then you should definitely go to the clubs. So the clubs will be, so there's affinity groups. So those are like the South Asian Law Students Association, the Asian Law Students Association, Latino Law Students Association, Native American, Black, all of these groups. There's like a gay, lesbian, like LGBTQ one. There's women's law, women of color. There's international, first generation. There's everything. So if you have any like unique identity and you want to like be in a room with people who have that identity, you'll find that. So apart from affinity groups, there's the student government. So I think at Charmaine's school, it's the Bar Association. For ours, it's called the Law School Association, Cornell Law School Association. But it's the same, it's basically student government, like ASI. They just do events, straight up events. They talk to admin, but you know how admin versus student government goes. It's always, they hate each other. No one does anything about it. So it's, yeah. And it's, again, it's not as much of a resume patter as ASI would be in undergrad. The Bar Association or Law School Association won't be as much of a padding in law school. And then the third group is like specific interests. So Corporate Connect is the big one here because, again, 94% of us go into big law. So they're all working for the dark side in the big law firms. So there's Corporate Connect, which will help you apply to those. They have like this special thing called a firm tour where we go to NYC and we have like meet and greets with the firms. And that really helps with the application because if like an associate has met you before, they're more, or the partners, they're more likely to hire you, right? For a summer job or for a permanent job. So that's like a benefit that Corporate Connect will get you. Similarly, Public Interest Law Union will invite, you know, the ACLU or the other public interest government employers or nonprofits to speak, and then you can network with them. So there's all these chances to network, to learn more about the field, international law, property law association. There's so many international arbitration, Lawyers Without Borders, Federalist Society, if you're conservative, not judging. I've taken their pizza. I've gone to the FedSoc meetings and taken their pizza. So there's like so many different things you can do. I would say that there are also, like, apart from those, there'll be like very fun clubs. So there's like a Cornell Law Hiking Club. There was like a Wine and Jurisprudence Club, which was I don't know about it, obviously. And then we have a squash court under the library. Squash court is like tennis, but it's like played on one side, and you got to search it up. It's a very weird sport. But we have a squash court, so we had a squash club, Cornell Law Squash Association. So I joined that too. So just join everything, and they'll have elections for 1L rep. But the election is like you raise your hand, and they'll say, okay, you're a 1L representative now. So if you really want resume padding, the best kind of resume padding there is you just raise your hand and they make you a 1L rep. So it's fun, free food. Don't think it'll make or break your application. Honestly, if you don't do any of them, it's fine. But do it because it makes you happy. Do it because you think it'll interest you in a new set of law, or do it because it has a new identity or a unique part of your identity that you can share with others.
We have basically the same thing at our school. I'm part of the Women's Law School Association. We have these things called outline banks where people will put their outlines for their club members. So if you ever want references to use for an outline, that's another reason why you would join a club. I'm also part of the Asian Pacific American Law School Association, also known as APALSA. There's mentorship programs, as Sasha mentioned. Certain clubs will pair you up with upper years so that you can get mentorship based on your interests and such. There's always free food. There's things like moot court boards. So I was part of the international arbitration moot team, and we had a lot of fun doing that. I know we have pickleball teams. We also have volleyball teams, basketball teams. There's a lot going on. There's one for everyone. Don't join too many your first semester. If that's something you think you have to do. As Sasha mentioned, it's not as big as a resume pattern. It's sort of for your own interests. And if you list it, you're likely to have something to talk about if you have a interviewer who's part of the same organization. As Sasha mentioned, there's also things such as FedSoc and ACS, which is two sides of the political spectrum. They're not supposed to be political. They say they aren't political. They are, in fact, somewhat political. FedSoc's structure is that they will host debates. I think ACS might do this as well, but either way, they host debates, and it's an opportunity for you to see two lawyers or two professionals get really riled up at each other while not being able to physically come to blows while you enjoy food. So it's like free entertainment, you know? There's a lot of panels like that in law school. It's just honestly pick people who you think you get along with and pick the clubs that will give you the best food. Like I have gone to FedSoc meetings and I have stolen their in and out. Like, you know, no one's got time for morals when it comes to free food. Just join what makes you happy.
Yeah, no, I've joined ACS is the American Constitutional Society. It's like the liberal version of the FedSoc, which is the conservative one. I've gone to both of them. I'm a 1L rep for the public interest people, and I'm a 1L rep for the corporate connect people. So you know, it doesn't matter. They're not going to hold you to this. 1L reps don't do anything, by the way. So there's a lot of stuff. But I also forgot. She mentioned moot court. There are two important extracurriculars, and that's law journal, which is it's the equivalent of like research, scientific research. Law has law journals where you publish articles. So there'll be like the flagship law journal, which for them it's I think Arizona Law Journal or something like that. Arizona Journal of Law. For us,
it's ASLJ, yeah, but it's super rigorous. You don't have to join it ever.
Yeah. But for ours, it's Cornell Law Review. And then like they'll have like specific journals in specific areas. So we have international law and we have law and public policy. So those are our two law journals. And the law journals are very prestigious if you get into that. At least at Cornell, I don't know. I don't want to speak to ASU because I don't know, but they're very prestigious. If you get onto them, it shows that you're able to write very well, right? You're able to write so good that you can get published. But it's mainly publishing what professors say. So I've heard that if you join Law Review, professors will grade you better because they want to be published in the journal. So if you're on the editing board, they'll grade you better so that you publish their articles. I don't know about that, but that might be a reason to join Law Review. And then the other one is moot court. Moot court is like mock trial, but it's at the appellate level. So there's no evidence. It's mainly just arguments. There's no evidence or witnesses. It's just arguing. So it's less like performative. It's less like drama than mock trial, but it's still very fun. There's arguing in front of a judge. It's still, you know, you're pretending you're both sides of a case. And that one's very prestigious as well. I remember our con law professor won like the Harvard moot court competition. And there was a lot of, I think he got a Supreme Court clerkship from that. So it's very, very prestigious to do the moot court and Law Review. So those are the two big extracurriculars. Clubs, otherwise, other than that, it's just your discretion.
Yes, very good that he mentioned that. Those are very important. If you do nothing else, pick at least one of them because those are what employers are looking for. Law Review is incredibly prestigious. They weigh your first year writing grades very heavily. It's your ability to write, your ability to use our citation manual, which is called the Blue Book. You'll never guess what color the color is. You use that manual, and those are very important skills, especially if you're going into a legal clerkship afterward for a year with a judge, or if you're going into big law and you have to write like important memos that you're submitting to the court, right? So that's important. Join moot court, do one of those, because especially if you want to do litigation, which is standing up and talking, doing moot court is a great way to get more comfortable with speaking. You'll get the ums and the ers drilled out of you. You'll be very confident. You'll have to hold your hands a very specific way so that it's not obvious that you're nervous. So I think, yeah, definitely try and join one of those. But other than that, have fun. Just have fun. Don't do things you don't want to do because you think it's going to get you a job. A lot of people join FedSoc because they think it's going to get them a job. Honestly, it does get them a job, but don't join something just for the sake of getting a job.
Well, I think that's all of the questions that we've prepared. Dante, are there any questions in the live chat?
No, it's all clear from here.
Okay. Well, in that case, I guess we could probably end here unless Dante, you have any other questions. But I just want to say that it was a very insightful panel. A lot of the advice you guys gave is really applicable across the spectrum. The other thing I was going to say is that this whole section on like the law school experience has actually made me kind of want to switch over to law school. Just from you guys talking about it, it sounds really fun. I'm sure it's very rigorous too, but it just sounds like a very fun experience. Probably not going to do that, but yeah, it was a very great panel. So the law school experience section was very insightful and exciting, and then the application section was just very good advice in general. So yeah, I just want to say thank you. Samuel, do you have any other comments?
Yeah, just echoing what you said. Thanks so much for your guys' time. We know you're really busy, and we're really grateful that you decided to spend 2 hours of your time answering our questions. And I know they'll be helpful for lots of aspiring law students in EEP, outside of EEP, if they somehow find this video, and people like me who aren't even going to apply to law school.
If I may, yeah, so just 3 things. First of all, thank you so much for having us. I if you can't tell, I love the sound of my own voice. So love any chance to talk and impart some advice. So that's the first thing. Thank you guys so much for having us, and I really hope to be back for any future, alumni events and giving any advice I can. Second of all, there's a lot of things, that we can't cover. There's a lot of intricacies within law school. There's a lot of intricacies in the application process. In all of this, please, for God's sake, I'm going to reiterate, contact us, ask us. My email is sprakir2@calstatela.edu if you want to reach out to me, or just Google me on LinkedIn and then give me a note on LinkedIn. Anything you want. I'm sure Charmaine is the same way. Please, anything, any questions about law school, any questions about EEP, any questions about anything, ask. We're more than happy to answer. So that's the second. What was the third? Oh, thank you guys, Samuel and Stelina, for giving such great questions and for having the opportunity to have us on it. Best of luck with your guys' grad and med school applications. So best of luck, and thank you so much again.
Yes, thank you so much for having.
Sorry. One quick comment. Is your Cal State LA email still valid? I know normally it's invalid after people graduate.
I think mine's still active. I still get spam, but okay, I'll give my my more personal then. It's Prakir, my last name PRAKR SASHA at gmail.com. So it's just prakirsasha@gmail.com. Last name, first name @gmail.com.
Yes, thank you so much for having us. I know you guys said it was supposed to be 1 to 1.5 hours, but as you could tell by our bios, we are not concise. We can be concise, but we tend to want to give you every detail we can. And please do reach out to us. We're always happy to help. I'll have my contact information in the server later. I'll make sure Stelina or Dante are able to get it and put it up there. Thank you so much for you two for doing such a great job hosting. I'm always happy to give advice and be able to tell you about law school misadventures. And just for anyone who wants the email immediately, it's just 3 C's, CCCHUI@asu.edu, and you should be able to reach me there. Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you for coming on. Yeah. All right, I think just about wraps everything up. Thank you again, everyone who's been watching. Thank you again to our panelists and alumni liaisons for being great at your jobs. And that will be all for today. See you guys. Okay.